So we have our dialogue here in our movie, but what's really going to help here is to add a little bit of room tone, a little bit of ambience. And so let's go over to our media pool. Here in our sound effects folder, we should have a clip called GC Ambience Interior Bathroom, which is going to be really helpful. And so this is just kind of like the sound of the air, sound of the environment, the room tone here. And that's going to kind of fill in some of these little gaps that are just completely silent. You pretty much never want that. That's called dead air. We don't want that. And before I play this back, I'm actually going to take the volume down here for our preview because these ambience are very, very loud. So there we go. That's kind of what we're looking for, is that little bit of just kind of ambient noise. And in this preview, this is where we can set our in and out, just like we would normally do in the viewer in the edit page. But I'm just going to use this whole thing. I can grab it and drag it down here, and I can either drag it to an existing track, or I can make a new track just by dragging it down like this. So let's put that in, and this is going to be our ambience. Now, before long, our tracks are going to get crazy. And so it's probably a good idea to start renaming these. All you do is click on the track name. And so we'll call this dialogue dash guy, and then we'll say dialogue dia/girl, and this is going to be our ambience, AMB. You can name these however you want as long as you recognize it. And the first thing I'm going to do on this ambience is I'm going to take the volume down on this track. So to do that, that's going to be in our mixer, and it's a little bit confusing because the mixer is right here on the side. And what we're going to do is look for track 3. So there's A1, audio 1, audio 2, and audio 3. Here we have audio 1, audio 2, and where's audio 3? Well, there is a little scroll here that we can scroll over, or we can even move this out a little bit to see more tracks. And so here on track 3, we're going to take this fader all the way down. Let's take this to like, I don't know, -20, something like that, and just see how that sounds compared to our audio. There we go. That's a little better. Push this up so we can hear it. So that ambience is still a little bit hot. We'll take this down a lot more. And what's nice is I can play this back while I'm adjusting the volume in this track, which is a little bit harder to do here on the interface or in the inspector. So I can just take this down and just bring it up just to where I start to notice it. I don't even know if on your speakers, but it definitely, it sounds like there is air in the environment now. So that's great. Let's go ahead and close our media pool, and we'll just work with this. Again, let's just grab the edge of this, and I'll just split this just like we would on the edit page and get rid of this edge. There we go. And now we have our ambience. We can also colorize a track just by right-clicking and going down to change track color. And this can be really helpful for organizing your different types of sounds. And so maybe we'll have our dialogue apricot. Sure, right-click, track color, apricot. That'll also colorize them here in the mixer. It'll be a little bit easier. Ambience, let's turn green. Sounds good. Now let's add a little bit of music. So same thing, media pool. We're going to go up to our Fairlight directory because we have our music right here. Same thing, just drag it in. We'll just butt this up here. And so we have our music that's a little bit long for our scene. Now, if we want to make this music fit the length of the clip, there are ways to do that in the studio version of Resolve that's pretty fancy. So I'll show you that. I'll just kind of move this over here for a second. This whole clip is about 17, 18 seconds, something like that. So what we could do is trim this and then select it and go to the inspector. And there are some really cool AI adjustments that we can make to clips here in the Fairlight page. This one is going to be AI Music Editor. And so what we can do is we can select a target length. So let's say 17 seconds. So just 1700 and then hit adjust. It's going to analyze that clip. It's going to go through and figure out where all the beats are and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to try and make it shorter. And it will do a decent job. It's going to actually make this about 20 seconds. So let's actually maybe see if we can get this to, maybe we'll target like 15 seconds and then hit adjust. There we go. Yeah, it's going to want to do 12 seconds or something. So you can get it close, but it should do a pretty good job of making everything happen on beat. So let's listen. And that works. But if you don't like what it's doing here, or if you don't have the paid version of Resolve, here's a really easy way that you can shorten your music. I'm just going to reset this AI music editor and look at this full length. And let's just align this where we want it to be. Just get rid of our inspector here. Let's take a look at this. I think we want this to come to a head right when that toilet happens. Yeah. So let's actually just trim the front of this here. And let's have this end right about where that toilet happens. Let's have that just end right about there. Yeah, that's nice. So we have that kind of awkward, empty feeling there. Maybe we'll just fade this up like this.
Where is he? I had him and then you pushed me.
Yeah, so that actually works without having to do a bunch of edits. But I'll just alt drag this out so I can show you this. If you want to shorten a clip and have it on beat, this is the easiest way to do it. And you don't need any AI stuff. You can just do this yourself. A lot of music you can listen to and count on the beats, and then you want to cut it and splice it on the beat. This one is a little bit harder to count, at least for me. And so really what we want to do is just split this right here, and we'll just kind of trim this to be shorter. And really, a great way to do this is just to look at the waveform and look for similar waveforms. So this and this look similar. And so what I'll do is just trim this to be right on that peak here and move this down. Let's just see how this sounds. Decent. And what we could do is right click and say 24 frame crossfade like that. Pretty good. And now we have a shorter version of the song. So that's a great way you can splice a song, but we don't even need to do that right here. We can just have it fade in and then end right there. We'll also have this fade out. Great. Now, this is going to actually be masked a little bit with a toilet flushing sound. So that's going to be in our effects that we add to this. And really a great way to go about adding your sound effects and everything is to do it in passes. Just like we edit in passes and do our color in passes and everything, doing this audio in passes is really helpful. We're basically looking for the big obvious things, the things that are going to take somebody out of the experience if they don't hear it. And we want to add those effects. So anything that should be making a sound that should be really obvious, boy, that better be in it. Okay, so let's go through here. And what I'm just going to do is just hit M on the keyboard for a marker. That's going to add a marker to our sequence, and that'll help us remember to add the effects there. Okay, so right as we go, we need this closing door sound. In the story, she falls down from inside the door, so we definitely need something like that. Probably opening the door might be good. We need the toilet flushing sound right there for sure. Oh no. Moving the book, we need some kind of audio for that. Opening the lid. Yeah. So all of that kind of needs to happen. By the way, this scene, if it's confusing out of context. So the kid, he just shoved her in the bathroom holding the alien, and she fell down and accidentally flushed the little blue alien down the toilet. So this is where things really get bad. So let's just go through this. So this first effect we need is the door closing. And we can open up the media pool and look for our door closing stuff. But I want to show you a really cool thing about Fairlight. So let's say that you have a whole bunch of sounds. Like we're just giving you like 20 sounds or something. But if you have 700 sounds, it can be really hard to go through and listen to every sound and try and figure out the exact sound that you want. And so this sound library, this is a way that you can tell Resolve where all your sounds are, and it can index them and make it really easy to find the sounds that you need. All you have to do is go to these three dots and say add library. And we're going to navigate to our files and our sound effects folder that we downloaded and hit select folder. But you can select any folder on your system, anything that has all of your sounds. And then it's going to go through and scan all of the sounds and index them so that it can quickly find them. And if you have lots and lots of sounds, it might take a little bit, but this is going to be really quick. Sound library sounds scan successful, hit OK. And now we can search here and it will quickly bring up anything. So if I type in toilet, here are all of the toilet sounds. Toilet sounds. So we have toilet flush, toilet lid open, and we can just double click on this to play it back. So there's our flush, toilet, dropping the book on the toilet, opening the lid, all of that. We can find the toilet stuff really easily. So let's type in door. Now we have all of our door sounds. So doorknob sound. Yeah, that's good. We need the door closing. Yeah, good. So here we can set our in and our out just like this. And we can drag this into a new track, and I can take off snapping so that I can move this back and forth really easily. Good. And we'll get rid of this marker. Here we need the kind of falling down sounds. Let's type in body. That'll bring up, we have our body drops. There we go. And we can use J, K, and L to play this back. So these are all different sounds that we can layer to make it seem like there's body hitting the floor. So to do that, let's make a few more tracks here. I can add tracks by right-clicking on any track and just going to add tracks. And let's add a few mono tracks. Let's do 5 mono tracks. We'll add those. We'll do below audio 5. Sounds good. Make sure we rename this. And generally, like, it's okay to add 1,000,000 tracks. All right. There is a limit to the tracks, but it's a really big limit. So just add a new track for every new sound. What I would do is group similar sounds that are in a similar environment at the similar time on a track, but otherwise pretty much make everything else a separate track. Just because then you have control over all of those tracks with the faders, and it's really easy to kind of mix things later. So this one will be called a door. This one is music. And let's just make these really tiny. And all these tracks, we're going to call this body 1, body 2, body 3, and so on. So now we have 5 tracks here. I can hold shift and scroll up to give us a little bit of room here. And let's just grab some of these body drops. Just set an in and out, something like that. Drag this into body 1. Let's go a little further, get some other ones like that. Drag this in. Good. We'll use the knuckles body hit. Sure. Just like that. Throw that in here too. So now we have 5 different tracks of all of these different sounds. And I can quickly trim these using my range selection here, just grabbing the empty spaces and getting rid of it like that. It's a really nice way to trim this stuff if I need to. Good. And now we can just layer these on. So we'll just shove these all together like this and just see what it sounds like. Let's just see how it goes. Yeah, and click solo just on these. There we go. Maybe I'll just kind of move these around and maybe spread them out a little. Good. So now we have something definitely falling down, crashing, that kind of thing. And if we want to control all of these tracks together, we can group them. I can select body 1 and shift select body 5 and hit Control G. And this is going to make a group, and we'll just call this body drop. And we're going to link all of these controls here. Let's just go ahead and link all of them and then hit save. And now what's going to happen is if I adjust the controls for any of these, it actually adjusts them all. And so I can link all of these different parameters for my tracks. And even though they're on different tracks, they're working as one track. So that's a nice way to do it. So if I want this to be quieter, I can bring that down. So that kind of works, and I can link these together like that. The other thing I could do would be to put these into a bus. A bus is sort of like a group of tracks, but it's really more like a separate mix that each track goes into. What a bus will do is route the output of all of these tracks into one track. And then you can control it like we were doing with these sliders, but you can also add effects to all of the tracks all at once, and it's actually really nice. And so to do that, we can go here to our bus outputs and select a different bus, but we need to have another bus first. So we can go up to Fairlight and go to bus format. This is going to be a list of all of our buses. By default, there's something called bus 1, which is a stereo bus, and that is the main output. So the thing that our audience is going to hear. Anything that we want our audience to hear goes into bus 1. Let's make another bus. That'll add that, and let's call this a body bus. And heck, let's make it a different color. How about blue? Great. And then we'll hit OK. That's going to add another bus here. And we can tell our tracks to go into a different bus. So right here where it says bus outputs, take this little drop down and switch this to body bus for each of these tracks. All right. And now something interesting is going to happen. I'll close our sound library, give us a little room here. When I play this back, listen. Those tracks are playing back. There's audio happening here in the meters, but we don't hear it. Why is that? It's because we're sending these to that body bus. So this bus right here, but we don't hear the body bus. The body bus doesn't have any output. Our bus 1 is automatically our main mix. So it doesn't need a bus output, but body bus doesn't have anywhere to go. So what we should do is hit this plus and say bus 1. And now what's going to happen is all of these tracks are going to go into bus 2, our body bus. And then everything that happens in body bus is going to go into bus 1. All right. So we're routing it all through this one little pipe before we put it into the mix. So now when we play this back, there it is. No problem. The advantage here is that we could set our volume back to 0 on our tracks and then just turn it down in the bus. Okay. In this case, it doesn't really matter whether you turn it up in the tracks or the bus, but the real advantage to having a bus is that you can add effects. Now, we haven't gotten much into effects, at least here in the Fairlight page. Probably the most familiar version of effects would be to go into the effects panel here, and we have all kinds of audio effects that we can drag onto a clip. And so real quick, let's just solo the girl's dialogue. We'll just play this back here. I'll just loop this part by hitting I and O.
You pushed me! I had him and then you pushed me!
And so any of these effects I can grab and put onto a clip. So sure, let's grab this flanger. Let's get crazy. And when I drag on an effect, that's going to come up with this little dialogue here where we can select presets and adjust all the different crazy things about these effects.
I had him and then you pushed me!
Okay, I can turn an effect off or on with this little switch. This is like a broken out version of what's in the inspector. In fact, if I went over to the inspector and under effects, just like in the edit page, we have our controls for our effects and we can change those around or delete it or click on this little icon here to bring up our fancy interface again. So this is an effect that's applied to a clip, but we can also apply it to a track. And so let's grab delay and put this on the track. We can drag that right on the track header and that will apply to the track itself.
You pushed me! I had him and then you pushed me!
Great, that works. We can also see that effect in the mixer. Here we have our delay effect added right here in the mixer. And so we can add effects with this little plus. We can select a effect from the list and that works. And we can add effects to tracks as well as buses. And so I could put an effect on this bus. So we'll add a little bit of reverb, let's say. Let's go back to bodies here. And now that's going to add reverb to our body hits. And that's because this is applied to the bus. That's actually taking all of this stuff and routing it through our reverb and all the other things in this track, and then putting it into our bus one, which is our main output. Now, not only can we use effects like this, but we can also use these kind of built-in strip effects here. And this is actually going to be really convenient for these body hits because we want it to sound like they're happening on the other side of the door. So in a different room. And if you want something to sound like it's in a different room, you want it to sound a little bit muffled. And that muffled sound comes from cutting out the high frequencies, which we can do with an EQ. So to add an EQ to any track, all we have to do is just double click on this little cyan line, and that's going to bring up our EQ. If you're not familiar with an EQ, it's short for equalizer. And it's basically kind of like curves, but for your frequencies. So the higher frequencies are over here, the lower frequencies are here, and then this line is the volume of those frequencies. And so if you want the higher parts to be louder, you take something towards the right and you push it up like this. If you want the higher parts quieter, you push this low like this. See? And now that sounds like it's muffled, like it's happening in the other room. So that's exactly what we want to do, is take this side of our signal and just push it down. There we go. We can even take one of these other numbers and push it up a little bit just to give it a little more thump. Yeah, that's good. And so this EQ is being applied to all of our tracks here all at once because they're going through this bus. This again is so valuable because really think about just about anything you need to do. This is the kind of essential stuff, is putting audio into tracks. You can group the tracks if you want to. You can arrange the audio in time here on the timeline, and then you can route these tracks through different submixes using buses and apply any kind of effects or anything that you want to the individual clip, the track, or the bus. So you have so much control over your audio. And again, this is stuff that you don't really get in the edit page. But something to mention is that this audio will still play back in the edit page. It'll sound just like it does in the Fairlight page in your timeline. And so that's really the essentials of adding sounds and messing with them and doing the sound design part of your movie. It's all about that: clips, tracks, buses. Now I'm going to skip ahead to a timeline that I had prepared just so I can show you a couple more things. You aren't going to have this timeline. I want you to build this yourself, but it's using all of the techniques that we just went over. So let's take a listen to what we have here. You have all of the resources to be able to make this.
Where is he?
I had him and then you pushed me!
There we go. So now we have a lot of action and everything happening here. When it comes to the audio, we have the toilet flushing, we have the ambience, we have the music, we have the effects of stepping and moving around and all of that. And it really feels like a fleshed out scene. This is an entire huge audio app that just has so much to go over, but these are really the essentials that you need. I do want to go over one more part, which would be working with our dialogue. One thing that we can do is take our dialogue and we can route that into a bus. And so let's go up again to Fairlight, So you can do this on your timeline if you want to. I can go to Fairlight, bus format. Let's add a bus and we'll call this a dialogue bus. And we're going to take A1 and route that to dialogue bus, A2, route that to dialogue bus, and take our dialogue bus and route that to bus 1. So now all of our dialogue is going to go through bus 1. What I can do, I'll just solo these real quick. If I want to balance out this dialogue a little bit, I can go to my dynamics here, which is this green line. I can double click on that. And this is going to do a lot of work with kind of how loud and quiet things are. That's just dynamics is the fancy word for that. And for your dialogue, a lot of the time, what you want to do is make sure that it's loud enough to be heard and not too loud to where it's clipping. And so again, we have an interface that's sort of like our curves, where if we play this back, you can see there's this little visualization here. And this shows how loud the signal is coming in along the bottom. And on the side, this is how loud the signal will be coming out. And so we can use a variety of these tools to change that signal. So one thing that's pretty common is to turn on the compressor. And what that does is adds a little curve right here. And so as things get louder, it turns it down. So it makes sure that as things get loud, they don't get too loud. It rolls off the louder parts of the signal. And so this threshold is where it starts to roll it off, and ratio is how heavily it does that. So what I like to do is have my threshold down here a little bit and push my ratio down so that if something's too loud, it just kind of gets dampened down. And what we're really looking for here is there to be just a little bit of gain reduction. So this little thing should have just a little bit of that. That's just taking the louder parts and pushing them down a little bit. And then we can take that and we can push this makeup up a little bit. And what that's going to do is make the entire signal louder. So it's kind of like we're taking the louder parts and squishing them down, and we're taking the quieter parts and pushing them up. And what that's going to do is level out the dialogue so that we don't have things that are too quiet or too loud. Now, you can get yourself in trouble with this. You can make it a little bit too hardcore. So you want to be careful. You want to listen to it, make sure it still sounds good. But this is a quick way to be able to make sure that your dialogue is audible, especially with something like a documentary or projects that have a little bit more run and gun audio that isn't perfectly recorded. This can really help make sure that you can actually hear everything that's going on.
Where is he?
I had him and then you pushed me.
So now this is a lot louder.
Where is he?
I had him and then you pushed me.
But it's not too loud. It has that presence. In fact, there is a dynamics just like this on my voice right now as you're listening to it, so that when I say stuff that's pretty quiet, you can still hear it. And when I talk really loud, it's not too loud. But this dynamics panel, spend some time with it. Play around with it, because this is really powerful. It can help you get a good mix in a lot less time. And in just this panel, there's so much to go over. We just can't do it all. A great place to start would be to, up here where it says default, go to something like dialogue compression, and that's going to give you a pretty good result.
Where is he?
I had him and then you pushed me.
And that's going to be a really great starting point for kind of leveling out your audio. So I usually do some kind of compression on the dialogue, a little bit of EQ as needed on each of these tracks. We have this track of the mom, some voiceover from the mom, and we made it seem like it's far away by one, turning it down a little bit, although we do have a little bit of compression on it just so that her voice isn't up and down too much. And we also have this EQ that, again, just cuts out these higher frequencies.
Hello? You guys left your bikes on the steps again.
So now it sounds like it's farther away. When we take this EQ off,
Oh, you guys left your bikes on the steps again.
it sounds like it's a lot closer. It doesn't sound like it's outside. Like I said, there is so much to go over here, but this should really get you started with the Fairlight page. If you really want to get detailed with your audio, this is the very best way to do it. And the thing that's so amazing is that Fairlight shares the timeline, just like the color page shares the timeline, and Fusion shares clips from the timeline. These three pages all work together with the edit page to help you make the very, very best project possible. Speaking of actually making a project, your project does not exist. Your movie is not a thing until you actually deliver it. So go ahead and pick a timeline that you like, maybe one of these that you've been working on, and just click on the deliver page for me. That's going to bring up our deliver interface. And this is much less complicated, much more simple, a lot less to go over here. But what the heck does the deliver page do? There are really three main phases here when you're talking about working with footage. There's production, which is actually shooting the footage. Of course, there's pre-production before that, but then there's post-production, which is editing, effects, graphics, sound, color. That's post-production. And then there's delivery. And delivery is converting your project from a file that just lives inside of Resolve into a movie that people can actually watch, something that you can upload to YouTube, or you can give to a client or put on a website or store on a hard drive that doesn't need all of your original media. It's kind of its own thing. So that's pretty much what the deliver page does, is it takes your same timeline. Again, this shares a timeline with the edit page and everything. This will take your timeline and convert it into a movie that people can watch. Pretty simple interface. We have our viewer here, we have our timeline down here, and we have our clips right here. Clips is just a quick way to select each clip. Timeline is kind of just a way to look at what's on your timeline, but you don't really do any editing or moving anything around here. This is mostly just for reference. The big action, the big stuff happens right here in our render settings. This is where 99% of the work happens in the deliver page. This is where you decide what kind of movie format you want to make. What kind of file are you creating here? What kind of quality and resolution and encoding and audio and everything do you want? And your choice on all of that stuff is going to be dependent on what you're making. And if you have no idea what you're doing, the great news is that you can start up here with some presets. If we scroll back and forth, we have presets for YouTube, Vimeo, TikTok, all kinds of stuff. And really what any of these do when you click them is it just sets all of the settings down here. And it's really split up into 3 different tabs: video, audio, and file. Video is all about the visuals, right? Audio is the sound, and file is kind of how things are named and organized. You have an option to render this in a single clip, so just as a movie, which is what you're going to do most of the time. But you can also render your movie as individual clips. That means that you can render each clip on your timeline as a separate movie. And so for various reasons, you might want to do that. If you're wanting to convert a whole bunch of clips into separate movies, that works. If you're wanting to prepare your shots to go into a different app, or if you want to prep a bunch of media for a course like this, I used that kind of thing a lot. But most of the time you'll hit single clip, and then it gets into the details of the video. So you have to pick your format and your codec and your encoder. And if you're lost at this point, you're like, what the heck is any of that? I'll show you the most common things to pick here in just a minute, but I do want to give you a little bit of information. When you make a video file, there are basically kind of like 2 main things that you're selecting. One is the codec and the other is the container. You could think of this as if you were organizing a bunch of papers. If you had a big long document and each frame of your video was a paper, let's say. The codec is kind of the way the papers are printed and put together. So what kind of quality you used on your printer, what size of type, what kind of paper you used. It's kind of like the details, right? The container is sort of like the box that you put it in. So what's sort of confusing is you can have a codec in different containers. So examples of codecs would be DNX HD, ProRes, H.264, H.265, Cineform, and there are a bunch of others. You don't really need to know all of them. You just need to know that this is the codec. It's the specific way that video is kind of encoded and created. It's kind of like the type of images that are being made. And the container is the file format that it's kind of putting those images into. So the container is called format here in Resolve. So there are a bunch of different formats, AVI, Cineon, all kinds of stuff. Do yourself a favor, and unless you have any reason not to, select QuickTime. QuickTime will let you create videos for just about anything you need, unless you have a client that asks for something specific like an MP4 or a MXF or something like that, or if they need a series of stills like a TIFF sequence or something like that, just click QuickTime. And then the codec, there are a bunch of different codecs here, and this mostly has to do with how compressed the images are. There are very compressed formats like H.264 and H.265, and there are formats that are less compressed, things like ProRes, DNxHR, and then there, of course, is uncompressed. Never do that. Never do that. You always want some kind of compression just because the compression is so good these days and it's going to be an insanely massive file if you don't have compression on it, okay? Encoder, probably just leave at auto. Resolution, you're going to usually use at timeline resolution. Frame rate is usually going to be the timeline frame rate. And the rest of this, you can probably just leave as default. For audio, same thing, probably leave it as default. And for your file, you want to make sure that you name it right. You can switch it to automatically do timeline name, which is helpful if you're rendering a bunch of different timelines, or you can just set a custom name and just type it in right there. You can also tell this to use a subfolder and do a bunch of stuff that I very rarely do. So what settings should we use? Well, it's come to my attention that most things in life can be expressed with a Venn diagram. So we're going to do that here. If you've ever heard the expression that you can have a job done fast, cheap, or good, but not all 3, this is kind of what we're up against for our codecs here. You can have something that's a small file size, or looks great, or plays back easily. And you can often get something that does 2 of these, but there isn't really a way to get all 3. And so if you want your video to look really, really good, you have a couple options. One is you have a more compressed option, which would be like H.265. This codec looks really good and it's a small file size. A lot of cameras shoot H.265 these days. Consumer cameras, even kind of the Sony mirrorless cameras, iPhones, those will shoot H.265 because it's a small file size and it looks good. The only problem with H.265 is that it is sometimes hard to play back on some systems. Because it's so compressed, your computer has to do a lot of work to decompress it. And so it can kind of be hard to edit. Now, if you're not going to be editing this and you're just putting it out on, say, YouTube, that's a pretty good choice because it's a small file size, it's a quick upload, and it looks good. Now, there are a couple of codecs. One is called ProRes, and the other one is called DNxHR, which I know sounds super technical, but it's just the name of the codecs. And those are designed to look really, really good, but their file size is big files. The advantage is that not only do they look good, but they also play back easily. They aren't as compressed, and so if you need to edit them, your computer doesn't have to work as hard. It is a bigger file, but it's also higher quality than H.265. It's especially good if you need to save it out into a video file and then convert it again later. The less compression, the better. And so ProRes or DNxHR, really, really fantastic if you need to export a video that you're going to edit more later, or if you're going to give a high quality version to somebody that they might need to cut a clip from at some point, or if you want to archive your movie so that you can go back and edit it in 5 years, ProRes or DNxHR, super great. Really, the only disadvantage is the file sizes are big. Now, we also have H.264, which actually plays back pretty easily these days, even though it is really compressed. It has a very small file size. The problem is that it doesn't look so great. It looks a little bit blurry, a little bit blocky, and especially in kind of detailed shots, not the best. And so what format do you export? Well, it depends on what is more important to you. Do you want it to look great and play back easily? That's ProRes. Do you want a small file size and have it play back easily? You don't really care if it looks that great? H.264. If you want it to look great and have a small file size and you're not that worried about actually editing it, H.265. These are probably the main codecs that you're going to run into, especially if you're a beginner. If you're doing something like creating movies for Netflix or something like that, they're going to probably want some other different kinds of codecs, but this will do great to get you started. So what's nice is up here in our render settings, we have some presets. So I can just select H.264, H.265, or ProRes, and that's going to set my settings to be probably just plenty good until you get much more nerdy about this. If you have the paid version of Resolve, you can render H.265. Literally clicking on H.265 master and setting a file name is a lot of the time what I do when I'm rendering something out. That is a great small video file that you can upload to YouTube or play back on a website. You can give to people and generally they can play it back. It's a little less compatible and a little bit harder to play back than H.264. So be aware of that, do some tests. The other thing is that I believe on PC, if you have the free version of Resolve, it won't let you render H.265. I think you have to do H.264. So this is yet another reason to get the paid version of Resolve because you can render out H.265 in the free version. On Mac, I believe you can just render out H.265, no big deal, but there's some licensing thing with the Windows version or something. But ideally, if you're going to render out to something like YouTube, I would just click on H.265 master and call it good. The optional step, the thing that I would recommend if you're going to render for YouTube is click on this resolution and upres this. So if you have like, say, a 1080p video, I would switch this to Ultra HD. That's going to render this out at 4 times the resolution. Why the heck would we need that? Well, it doesn't actually make the image look any better. There's no magic there. What it does is if you're going to put this on YouTube, if you upload an Ultra HD video to YouTube, YouTube uses a different compression and the video ends up looking better on YouTube. So it's really kind of just tricking YouTube to be nicer to the video, which I know is kind of weird, but that's a great way to do it. So if you're rendering out for YouTube, H.265 master, and then upres to Ultra HD. Once you have all your settings set, and so we'll just call this movie-YT for YouTube. Once you have your settings set, you can pick a location. I'll just browse. I'll just put this on my desktop. You should put it somewhere else. Okay, don't put it on your desktop. That's lame. And then we go down here and select add to render queue. Because I'm upresing this, it's telling me, hey, you know this isn't actually going to look any better, right? Like it's really, why are you doing this? And you just say, it's okay, just add. I know what I'm doing. And that's going to add a job here to the render queue. And so this is like a to-do list. You're telling it to render this timeline to the desktop in H.265 format, but it's not actually going to render it out and convert it into a movie until I hit this render button right here. Now, why didn't it just render it? Well, you can make multiple different versions of your movie for different purposes. Maybe I want to render out a different version. Maybe one somebody can just watch on their computer. There's no reason to upres this to Ultra HD, so I could just switch back to timeline resolution. We'll call this movie, we'll just say computer, okay? Add to render queue, that's gonna add that. And then let's say maybe I want a version of my movie that's really high quality that I'm just going to kind of put on an external hard drive or put on a server or back up somehow, just so that I have it. I just want the highest quality version of this video so that I can keep it safe. That's what we would call an archive version. To make an archive version in 2025, what I would do is select this ProRes preset. And honestly, that's probably good. Probably just do that. If you want to, you can go into the type and select something like ProRes 4444 or the XQ version. And this is going to be higher quality. Chances are you probably won't actually notice a difference. ProRes 422HQ is fantastic. And so then I would call this movie archive. The other thing I would do is go to the audio tab, make sure this codec is linear PCM. That means WAV files, files that aren't compressed. I can push up this bit depth. If you want the very highest quality audio, you could go to 32-bit float, sure. And then this is really cool. You can output different audio tracks for your movie. So you could have 16 different audio tracks if you want to, and you could render each track in your mix as a separate track. And so this is great for something like an archive where you might want to go in and remove some audio or replace the music or remix your audio or whatever you want to do down the road. This is a great thing to do for your archive version. And so right here, output track 1, I'm just going to actually switch this to all timeline tracks like this, and that's going to render all the timeline tracks. Now for this one, I only have one track. If we switch over to our Fairlight timeline, we have all these different tracks, and we can render each one of these as a separate track. Isn't that awesome? So I'll go ahead and add this to render queue. And once we have all of the different formats we want, all we have to do is hit render all, and that'll go through pretty quick and render our movie. And let me just show you this archive version here. Let's just add this to a new timeline. Check this out. So we have our high quality video here, but we also have all of the tracks that it rendered out as separate tracks, which is so cool. And now if we have this video file, we have all of the audio and visual in the highest quality possible, all in one file that we can go through and edit later if we want to. We can open up in 10 years and render to some new format that's even better. And it's kind of future-proofing yourself. You know what I'm saying? But that's pretty much the deliver page. Is you set your render settings here, you add them to the render queue, you can kind of stack them up and then render your project. So at this point, we pretty much covered all of the need to know stuff about DaVinci Resolve. And I hope that this is really encouraging and empowering for you. I hope that you feel like you can jump into Resolve and actually start using it. If we've never met before, my name is Casey and I'm part of a company called Ground Control. And our mission is to encourage you and empower you to be able to make things that you want to make. That's a really big part of what I feel like my purpose is here on Earth, is to tear down anything that's in the way of creativity so that you can express yourself and make the things that you want to make, because that's good for the world and it's good for you. It's good for your mental health. It's good for, so much stuff. So that's one of the big reasons why we made this video, is it needs to exist. Resolve is one of the most powerful tools for post-production available, and it's free, and you can get started so easily. And so I never want knowledge or confusion about an interface to be what's in the way of you creating things. And if you've watched this far in the video, odds are you're probably pretty serious about getting better at Resolve. And so whether you're brand new to video editing or just brand new to Resolve, I want you to make sure that you get that media and you open it up, you play around, you start to edit, you start to mess around with Fusion and mess around with color grading and mess around with audio. Actually put this stuff into practice, because that's where you're really, really gonna learn. Go out and shoot some videos with your phone, throw it into the timeline and cut it up and start making videos. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be amazing. Just start making stuff. It's so important. We find that our students that get the most out of our videos and courses are the ones that really put their hands on and start working and start actually learning things by doing. And so I want you to do that in any way that you can. Now, if you need some help with that, if you need a little bit of direction, something a little bit more solid than go shoot something with your phone, we do have a course that we just made called Make a Film in DaVinci Resolve. This is really the perfect next step after you watch this video, because now you have a foundation of how the heck Resolve works and all of the important things that you need to know to be able to make stuff. But where the rubber really hits the road, where it really starts to lock into your brain, is when you go through the whole workflow of making a project from beginning to end. And so what we did is we shot a movie and we got all of the media together that you would need to be able to edit that movie. This isn't a really long movie, it's a little short film, but it has all of the unedited, ungraded footage, all of the sound effects and graphics and assets that you need. And we packaged them up in a little kit. And then I recorded an entire walkthrough of creating the project from very beginning, like just holding a bunch of media, going, I don't know what to do with this, I don't even know how to organize it, to making the rough cut and getting your story laid out in the edit page, doing some pretty impressive visual effects in the Fusion page, doing the color grade, matching the shots, mixing the audio and making it look and sound beautiful, all the way to final render. We walk you through the entire process of creating that from start to finish. And that's a little bit more than you get with this video, where we have examples of things that you can do in each page, but it's not like a cohesive project. And when you put that project together yourself and you have ownership over that edit, and then you're doing the effects and you're doing the color grade all in one thing, at the end, you're gonna have a film that you can show your friends and family and say, I edited this entire film from start to finish. Everything that you see was touched by me. And that's such a cool feeling, and I want that for you. So if you want to take the next step and you watched through this video and you said, man, I just cannot get enough of this, the perfect next thing to do is to check out this course. There's a link in the description. I'll also put a link on screen right there-ish. And because you watch this video all the way through, you'll get a special discount. Does that sound good? But either way, whether it's through this course or through just shooting your own stuff, you need to get to work, because the more reps that you get in making things, the easier it'll be and the more cool things you'll be able to make. That's what it's all about.